but I'll say one. Okay.
I never know if I should look directly at it or not.
Well, you can if you want, yeah.
Shoes are falling off.
Right, okay, we'll start from here. Hello, welcome to Outlaw Bookseller with me, Stephen Andrews, and my good friend Graham Embray. Hi, Graham.
Hello.
Great to be in your demesne yet again. And here we are with another thrilling episode of two
Not
grumpy.
that thrilling.
That it's not that thrilling.
No.
Well,
no.
it depends on your point of view. Just
Well,
like
yeah,
all these
it does.
things, you
It
know.
does.
So yeah, another thrilling episode of two grumpy old men who discuss SF. Yes, and the eye bags are there. You know, the sort of the hairlines are receding.
The amount of time we spend in makeup.
Yeah, I mean
just wouldn't
hours and
credit
hours.
it. Yeah,
hours. And this, as Scott Bradfield says, there's no pixels. You know, it's the way it used to be when BookTube was in the Stone Age, what have you. So today, we're going to look at, what am I calling this video? I might call it the tip of the iceberg. But what we're doing is we're looking at some neglected SF novels, and we sort of batted back and forth some emails because, gosh, neglected SF novels. We could go on and on.
Almost everybody.
Yeah. I mean, and we probably will go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So, but it's because there is so much, and particularly if you're somebody who turns the stones over, which I like to do, and Graham's very big on that, so full kudos to the man here. So we're going to look at some things today which I'm aware of, but I haven't read. I've read some of these, and we narrowed it down to 10 authors and 10 particular books. In some cases, there's a diptych or two where there's 2-volume series, something like that. And we'll probably do a few of these because, you know, you can't just read the big four all your life, and you can't just read what's new all your life. You know, there's all sorts of fascinating stuff out there in the world, not just of genre fiction, but fiction per se, you know. So look at all sorts of things. So we are going to look at a load of books. We'll show you a load, and we've got a bit of a podium behind us there. And we were trying to work out what this was supposed to be called. This is from the NatWest Bank.
Yeah, but it was. Yeah.
It was in a bank a long time ago, but it is what it is.
This would have been in the day of Inkwells.
See, this is not going to work for those people who like Matt, a Bookpill style, when he goes straight into it. They're going to love this discursive thing, aren't they?
Next!
But, you know, we love Matt. You know, Matt's the man. He's incisive, intelligent, good taste, good looking.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Well, no, I talk about Matt. Anyway, hi Matt. Hope you're okay out there. And what are we going to do? So we're going to talk about a few things today, and you're going to lead this. And we're not going in alphabetical order or anything. The criteria was just to pick some books and authors we felt sort of deserved a bit more attention. You can watch out for when you're shopping online or, you know, in the wild. So we're going to start with Ian Wallace.
We are.
What do we have to say about Ian Wallace? So you have a few things to say about Ian Wallace. I've never read him. I've actually got some at home to read. He had some books in Door, but we're going to talk about the Croyd diptych. Isn't that correct? So what have we got to say about that, Graham?
Yeah. Well, these are a classic example of an author who is, as far as I'm aware, totally unknown today. But in the day, he was critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
And in fact, the SF Encyclopedia describes him as being the greatest writer of space opera since the Second World War.
Yeah, it's quite glowing, isn't it?
A massive thing.
And his books were in Door in the 70s, weren't they? Yeah,
examples of Door books here.
Yeah. These are not Door. These are Berkeley Medallion. That'll keep Scott Bradfield happy.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about these two particularly, Croyd and Dr. Orpheus. So you know, you lead off, dear boy. Tell us more about them. So what have we got to say?
Well, he basically wrote two distinct sequences of books.
Yeah, the other sequence is quite big, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're both quite big. But one of them is following somebody called Claudine St. Crier.
Yeah. Female character,
which was a female lead character, a
and
kind of intergalactic detective.
When were these written? 60s and 70s?
60s and 70s.
Yeah. So another example.
I mean, Croyd is 67. So.
67, right. Yeah. So the psychedelic era.
Yeah.
The psychedelic era. There is
and
actually,
the psychedelic.
And the psychedelic.
Yeah.
There is actually a video coming up on the channel about psychedelic SF, which somebody suggested, which I hope to do soon. Looking forward to doing that. So so late 60s, early 70s, and space opera.
Well, on the surface, they're pure space opera, but the author's approach is very, very different. In Croyd, which is this one here, begins with Croyd is basically a Superman with incredible powers. He can travel forwards and backwards in time. He can project his body into other people's consciences. He can download himself into a computer. Bear in mind this is 60s.
Yeah, so that's sort of early post-human computer thing there. Yeah, so there you go.
But he he is in certain respects quite an archetypal superhero, and he goes around saving the universe.
Yeah.
But it's the way he does it that is so original. Because instead of engaging in mind-numbing physical violence, he will, he'll alter events by changing time.
Yeah.
He will transfer
Obviously, that's
his
the thing, isn't
consciousness.
it? That's the thing. It has been for a long time. In
He'll transfer his
yeah.
consciousness,
Yeah.
to the centre of the galaxy or something to stop events happening. Right. But he's not like leading armies invading places.
No.
He basically, it's the power of the mind.
Yeah, because you get that in things like The Big Time by Fritz Leiber, and
it's not a new idea.
Time Patrol, but it's the way it's done.
It's the way it's done. Yeah.
And what's he like stylistically?
He's not an easy writer to read.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the critical consensus is a bit divided on him stylistically, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I did wonder about reading a few chapters, a few passages from in there, but I haven't done that
because it's quite a long time since you've read these. And I've never read them, and I do have some at home.
So the thing is, when he's trying to, he takes you in his mind to his thought processes of how he's going to.
Yeah, so you get that subjective thing in there.
Yeah,
it's just
and it can be
interesting.
quite difficult to work out what's going on.
Yeah.
At times, well, for me anyway.
So there's a certain sort of level of ambition there. In the sort of concept. It's not just like an adventure concept. There's a level of ambition.
But it's like so many books. It's on the surface, it's familiar.
Yeah.
Familiar space opera, alien invaders.
I think we'll come to that with a few of these, won't we?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, but it goes off on its own little journey. I mean, it begins with Croy, this super being actually taken over by an alien intelligence who is equal to his own intelligence, and it's a female intelligence.
Right.
And he is literally kicked out of his own body, and she takes over.
Right. Okay.
And he is transferred into another body, a female, an ordinary.
This is interesting
female.
Because of course,
so it's like transgender before it.
Yeah, so it's transgender before it was a thing. Because as if it never existed, of course it did. And also that's a bit like in Altered Carbon, as Richard Morgan, where Kovacs says re-sleeve this idea. And again, it's not a new idea in itself, but it's a perennial theme. But it's an interesting use of that. And we look at these a bit close. Berkeley Medallion, isn't that absolutely beautiful? Orange is the thing, very much. So you would recommend them. And I'm looking forward to reading. So I've got some aside, God knows when I'll get around to it. But there you go. If you've read Ian Wallace, please make some comments. We'd love to hear what you think.
They're good, mind-stimulating reads. But don't expect it to be something you knock off, even though they're short. This is another thing. They're short books, but the amount he achieves in that. You talk about galactic conflict and whatever, all in less than 200 pages.
Well, I think I said a while ago, the essence of good writing is eloquence, isn't it? When we talked about the long books and short books, it's being able to be incisive with the language and get to that point, and you don't need reams and reams of prose. If you do, because it's a complex sort of thing, because I very much when I'm right, I will go into reams and reams to try and get a proper explanation from all angles. That's a very sort of Socratic approach to sort of close off all the angles and to cover everything. But it's brevity, as you say, and again, historically, remember, most SF novels, most novels are much shorter than they are these days. Well, that sounds really interesting. We're going to move on now to I guess you could say an old favourite in a way. And this was a book that we used to talk about way back in the 90s, wasn't it? And I know I was drawn to it. I've got this fetish for titles, as you know. And this is The Hole in the Zero by M.K. Joseph. The Hole in the Zero. Isn't that a great title? This is Gollanc's first. I've got a copy of this, but mine doesn't have a jacket. It's the only book I've got, only novel I've got that doesn't have a jacket, and it gives me great pain. But it's quite hard to find. It costs you about 25-30 quid in hardcover. This is Gollanc's first. And
there was a paperback, though.
I've never seen the paperback. So if you're in the USA, there you go. We don't think this is have a paperback.
And there was a book club edition.
That's UK SF Book Club edition, The Hole in the Zero. Love that title.
Which is obviously cheaper.
We what can we say about him? Again, I'm going to let you lead off, and I'll add some comments because I've read this as well, and we'll see what we think about that.
Well, it's another book from the 1967 again. There's a theme here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could do a video on books published in 1967.
I think that will come. Yes.
He is like Ian Wallace. He's somebody who has quite a bit of critical acclaim.
Yeah, he is very acclaimed, isn't he? Yeah.
But he is, again, he's virtually forgotten today.
Yeah. This would be nice if this appeared as a Gollanc's masterwork.
Well, it should be.
I think it should be. Because it's a fascinating book. It really is. But anyway, tell us a bit more about it, and I'll throw my...
And again, like Croy, it's on the surface, it appears to be a space opera.
Yes, on the surface.
Yes.
This is the thing.
But it has depth.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, I struggle to describe it, but it's you have a quartet of characters
Yeah.
who all meet at a particular place.
I think the thing about it is when you first start reading it, doesn't it begin in a cottage? It's got this seemingly very prosaic opening, but it quickly goes very, very weird. And when I read it, I don't know, it reminded me of Time Bandits, which isn't something I particularly like, but it reminded me of that sort of, like, I think things start happening and appearing, and linguistically it's very interesting. It's the use of language is really interesting and ornate, and you've got the four characters, as you say, and it really is like a fairly in-depth look at these four personalities. And what seems to happen is that they seem to be involved in the reshaping of, I think, it's low probability areas of other dimensions. They could have cast into other dimensions, but they can sort of shape them. It's kind of Zelazny-ish in a way, that sort of thing.
They're creating their own sort of subjective realities. So in other words, there's a whole series of stories of realities they are creating.
And it's also that thing where what's interesting about it is, to me it was like recursive SF. What it seemed to be doing through the characters with the sort of little bits of world building they do in these dimensions is that it's almost like it's writing about SF writing. So it's so kind of ahead of his time in that way. So it's both a very interesting and colourful SF novel. It's conceptually pretty deep and there's a lot to it. But there's also this thing about commenting on SF writing, isn't it? The process of writing. So it's kind of metafictional as well, which is a word which I don't think was really maybe in non-existence then. And I mean, what drew us in, well, certainly what drew me in, I think it was the title, The Hole in the Zero. So if you want to fall into the zone, the hole in the zero, go beyond but beyond the edge of the event horizon into the singularity of this, cracking bit of recursive SF, you're in for a treat, and it's really interesting. I've not read it for years. I need to reread it, and it is a startler. It is a baffling one, but gosh, it does sort of give you the bucket of water in the face effect, which I've talked about before.
But it is readable.
So, it is.
Some people say it's a very difficult book, but I didn't find that.
Well, I think this covers again what we said about SF. SF should have a level of difficulty because it's supposed to wake you up. If it's presenting the familiar thing over and over again, then it's just comfort reading. Nothing wrong with comfort reading, but it's like Philip K. Dick said, space adventure fiction isn't science fiction. I entirely agree with that myself. But it's that thing, he does take what appear to be familiar novums, but he twists them and it becomes something else. And, now correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he work as a teacher?
I think he was a teacher.
He was a teacher.
Well, he was in New Zealand.
And this was his only SF novel, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is it the only one? Yeah, because I know you've got some other ones, sure. Here's A Pound of Saffron. You see a great dust jacket on that one, Graham.
It is.
Bit of a collecting fail there, dear boy, but at least you've got it. And there's this one, which I have seen before, Soldier's Tale, which is a mainstream novel. And we both like the mainstream, so there you go. And these writers who cross between the two things are usually the most interesting in our view. Funnily enough, I'm reading a Silverberg at the moment. I was saying to Graham earlier on, which is a historical novel called Lord of Darkness, which is fantastic, which I'll talk about in the channel when I finished it. Really enjoying it. It's great. Do wish he'd written more historical novels. He did 2 or 3, didn't he? So maybe he'll do one late in life. We'll see. But yeah, so that's really interesting.
Done some very recently, I think.
And something that he did apparently, and I'm not sure which edition it is, he did a scholarly edition of Frankenstein.
Yeah,
as well.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was 1818 text or the 1831, the later text. Yeah. But I must look into that one. But I've got so many editions of Frankenstein, I probably don't need another. But would be interesting to see what he said about that, given what he does in Hole in the Zero. So that's M.K. Joseph, something to watch out for, something to dig for, a good little obscurity, and it would be nice if that became a Gollocks masterwork, because I don't know whether they still have the rights, but dig a real obscurity out of the past. Interesting stuff.
But it was published, it was published in America in hardback, and in New Zealand.
When I was with Bob in Dorset last time I was down there, he had a Peter Tate book in paperback in America. When Peter Tate was Welsh, his books were never published in the UK at all, as far as I can tell.
Some were Faber's.
Faber?
Yeah,
they were. Gardens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Two Faber ones.
Yeah, I've got the Gardens one. Is this what Gardens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It's weird.
But I don't think they were ever paperback.
No.
Yeah.
No. The Welsh one about Welsh nationalism.
That's great.
Was only published in America. Weirdly.
I loved that. I thought it was great. But Bob had one of that Bradbury-esque series, the series which is set in the set in the town that Douglas Spalding grows up in Dandelion Wine. So Anyway, so who do we have next? Lloyd Biggle Jr. Is he next? Yeah. Okay.
Paperback and
hardcover. I've got a copy of that, which I bought after you and I were talking about them a while ago, a couple of years ago. I've not got around to yet. See, that's got that looks like a remainder cut in there, but I think it's more just like a ding, isn't it? Because this doesn't go all the way through. So we talked about that in another video. So, Lloyd Biggle Jr.
Yeah, Lloyd Biggle was one of the first. One of the first writers
I'll do it.
one of the first genre SF writers I ever read. I read this book in 1986, and it was bought in Hay on Wye. My first ever trip to Hay on Wye. He has always struck me as somebody who, he's very different to a lot of SF writers, in that he tends to go for a more peaceful approach to his world creation. Diplomatic,
Diplomacy.
Instead of everybody killing each other all the time. And in this novel, it's set in a sort of Edenic alien planet, a beautiful world with colonists and the like.
But it's a legal thriller, isn't it?
Well, that is an element.
Yeah.
It's kind of 50-50, I think.
Right.
Because the first part is very much exploring the planet and, discovering the characters.
Yeah.
And, there are some amazing images in there, like when this woman, the daughter of the ambassador there, goes out into this forest, beautifully described forest, and she goes up and smells a flower, and the flower dies because her breath kills it. And
So
basically everything in this
That's
Edenic, beautiful
Yeah.
world is humans are inimicable.
Because if you think of that's the opposite of a
Elitist.
later book, isn't it? Which
Yeah.
is Bios by Robert Charles
Yeah.
Wilson, which is a great
Yeah.
book where colonists go to a planet, or scientists go to a planet where everything is really, really deadly to humanity. That's like the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's an
Yeah.
environmental comment.
Yeah.
Well, when did this come out? Because I'm
It was
thinking then.
74.
So it's after the word for world is forest.
Yeah.
But obviously,
But it is quite early.
environmental concerns came into SF in the 50s. I mean, there are earlier ones, but I mean, I see maybe Earth Abides as being a sort of seminal text that way, because of course he was environmentalist and agronomist, wasn't he? George R. Stewart. But this is a very beautiful book. And
Tim White
so
cover.
it's seeking civilized, gentle
It is.
solutions.
Yes.
So Becky Chambers wasn't the first of being
No,
civilized and gentle.
No.
We know there was
No.
Maureen F. McKay
No.
did all that stuff before
No.
she did.
But basically, the planet, which is called, I've forgotten.
Let's see what it says in the blurb. What's the planet
No, I
called?
can't remember what it is.
Langrye.
Angry, that's it. Oh, yeah. Basically, there are people living on this planet, and industrialists want to build a resort there,
As they do.
a tourist resort, and basically destroy the planet. And the people who live there, the natives, set about preventing that. Now, in a kind of Avatar where you would have, fighting and violence, but in this it is done with legal methods, and it's part kind of.
Which is kind of what happens in the real world, isn't it?
It's like the real world. I mean, half the book is on the planet. The other half is dealing with legal procedures.
Yeah.
Which maybe sounds a bit boring, but it was, it made
But
a
that's
change.
the real world. Yeah, it is. It is. This is a really nice little omnibus you've got here in A format of, funnily enough, The Light That Never Was, which I just flashed up, and Monument as well, which we're discussing. Both covers on there. That's really nice, actually. And NEL, do you love NEL? We really do. But that's great. So if you come across that, pick it up. And he wrote loads of stuff, didn't he? Absolutely.
Yeah, well, most of his books are
Got some
featuring
links
a character called Jan Darsak,
Right.
who is kind of an agent who goes around
Sure,
the universe. But
Yeah. So that's a bit like Laumer does with Retief and Poul Anderson does with his main characters in the Polysectonic or whatever it's called league, that thing, the unpronounceable jawbreaker. And here's funny enough, I saw a copy of this down again when I was down at Bob's the other day, and I thought I should pick that up because it's something I need to look at, and I do like this. And that's Millington, great publisher Millington, only around for a few years. Do love Millington books, and that's Silence is Deadly. So there's just a couple there.
Yeah.
So
the funny thing is that this kind of galactic council that is being set up to try and regulate colonization and everything. The people from Earth are actually banned from it.
What does that tell you?
They lie.
Yeah, shocking, isn't it?
And it's like lying is a very trendy thing now.
That reminds
people were noticing 8 years ago.
Isn't there? I'm sure I've read at least one SF story novel where there are aliens who can't lie.
I think it's
what is that?
Theme. I can't think what.
I think there is one which is very predicated upon that, but that's been a thing. If you know what it is, remind me because I can't remember honestly. But I've just come up a few times. So that's Monument, like Biggle Jr. This is fairly easy to get actually. There's quite a few copies of this out there, which sort of tells you that at one point he was probably quite popular and people sold on, and he had big sort of bibliography, loads and loads of books. And I think it says in yours when this one was published, which is early 70s, he'd written more than 40 short stories, 2 collections, and this was his 7th novel. So like a lot of these guys, big oeuvre, so good solid genre SF. And I am looking forward to that. I have read the first 2 pages and straight away I could see what you meant. So that's another one. So it's another obscurity I must get under my belt.
It's really good at world creation, and that is his primary idea, I think.
Yeah.
But then you get this kind of almost like legal procedural.
Interesting, because the thing with the legal thriller, people think of people like Scott Turow and who's the other big one? John Grisham. You know, it's quite a hard-boiled thing. I mean, I really like Gianrico Carafilio, the Italian author, who does very gentle legal thrills with lots of light and shade, and light and shade is good, it's a good thing. So looking forward to that. That's great. So then we go on to somebody else I haven't read. Gosh, shocking, isn't it, really? And we're going to talk about R.W. Mackleworth. Again, you see lots of books around, and we've got some Mackleworth behind us on the podium here. And look at that, Robert Hale books are very collectible. Most of them are estate, low production values, pumped out for libraries. I think I've got the most collectible and highest literary quality Hale, which is the Samuel R. Delaney one, which is worth about 400 quid, and I got it for about £3 in the book barn.
Well, one of those is an Ice Age book. I think it might be that one.
Is it that one?
Yeah,
Tilt Angle. Sounds like. Yeah, good stuff. So there you go. So what do we know about R.W. Mackleworth?
To show that one. This is the one we're talking about. Year of the Painted World.
Right. Okay.
Again, is a book I read back in probably about 91, a long time ago.
Yeah.
This was published in 1975. And I think he had 4 books.
Yeah.
And that was it.
But he wrote in all genres, didn't he?
He did. But what
crime, romance.
Yeah.
Isn't there a book on English furniture as well?
I was referring to somebody else.
All right.
I was referring to
it's not a book English furniture.
Yeah.
There's a tell. If you go and write a science fiction novel called English Furniture and we'll review it for you.
Yeah.
Oh God, I said that somebody will do it now. Never mind. Carry on.
What I was going to say is that there are people who write science fiction, and there are people who write science fiction who also
just write
other things.
Yeah.
And there suspense writers, thrillers. And the English Furniture was a reference to John Gloag, who wrote a book on English furniture, who also writes science fiction.
Yeah.
But
so that was a happy mistake.
Yeah, it was a happy mistake. Yeah.
Great. I absolutely love this font. Logan's Run is what that says to me.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is that this book is written not like a science fiction book, like a suspense or a thriller.
Right.
I mean, it begins with scenes which would be very familiar to people who are into film noir and stuff like that. You've got rain-slicked streets, terrace streets with factories belching out pollution.
That whole noir
that
thing,
whole kind of familiar image. And yet, instead of somebody standing in the background about to stab someone or something, you've actually got somebody who's infected.
Isn't this like
by an alien
Organism.
Organism.
Well, this happens in a British northern city, doesn't it?
It
Is that right?
does,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's a bit Get Carter, as it was.
Yeah,
It's
it
got that
is,
sort of,
yeah,
as you say,
yeah.
the belching smokestacks and stuff. So yeah. So it's a bit Ted Lewis.
And people
Right,
are there for a conference in a hotel on environmental pollution. Ironically enough,
It's the
and
light
that
bubble
is,
thing
is
again.
one of the major themes
Right.
of this book is pollution.
Yeah.
But you have this organism that is basically come from Mars on a sample
Mars.
return probe, and the thing gets released into the environment.
Yeah.
And it starts to spread.
Right.
And in a sense, it's a bit like
That's a bit like Quatermass, isn't it?
Yeah,
as well?
yeah.
I mean, you get these things are common. It's
Yeah,
the riffing
yeah.
what you can do with these different
Yeah,
tropes, isn't it?
yeah,
It's what's interesting.
But,
Yeah.
but the thing, it infects everything, not just people. Trees, buildings, everything.
Yeah.
And it grows, and it creates this kind of beautiful, almost surreal
Okay.
effect, which
Yeah.
is why I remembered it over all these
So it's
years.
rather like, say, a Max Ernst landscape, Europe
yeah,
After the Rain,
yeah,
with They'll Cover for
yeah,
Crystal World by
yeah,
Ballard.
yeah.
So it's got that sort of surreal element in it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
also, I mean, the thing about infection, I mean, that sounds, isn't it a John Lymington book that's rather like that? You
Well,
know, so-
John Lymington is similar to Mackleworth in that he writes in
Night
many-
of the Big Heat.
Yeah, Night of the Big Heat. Writes in many different genres.
Yes, yeah.
So you could have the Night of the Big Heat is set in a kind of familiar,
Yeah.
almost cosy like environment of a pub,
Yes, yeah.
and then there are these aliens outside.
Yeah, is it set on an island? Or am
I think it is an
Yeah, I
island,
think it is,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, there is a
Yeah.
film of it as well,
Yeah.
which is fairly
But the book
cheesy,
is a
but-
lot better.
Yeah, yeah. But Lymington, didn't he write under another name as well?
Yeah, it's John Newton Chance or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
You know.
I get confused between him and
But here are some-
Douglas
here are
Massey.
some examples.
Here's some examples of John Lymington books. In his time, he was like seen as a kind of competitor for Wyndham and Christopher, wasn't he? He was seen as a great English catastrophe novelist. And again, Robert Hale again.
Yeah.
That's Robert Hale. And I mean, these are getting harder to find. You used to see them everywhere, and they've died off a bit now. But again, I don't think none of those have come up in the British Library series that Mike Ashley has done, have they?
Yeah.
And they probably should. Maybe there's a copyright reason or something, because that's the sort of thing you'd expect Mike to sort of jump on. He's done lots of other things like Charles Eric Maine. But anyway, we're veering off.
Quite
We're
a lot
supposed
of
to be
his
talking
books
about
were,
Mackleworth.
well, some of his books were published in paperback.
Yes,
But
but not all.
I
Yeah.
couldn't find my examples
Yeah,
of them.
but it's
But,
interesting as we've touched it on the channel on libraries and how libraries also would be very different. People use libraries a lot more. There's no internet, fewer bookshops, fewer large bookshops, and a lot of hardcovers you didn't see them in stock in bookshops. They were mostly sold in libraries, and it's very, very strong library sort of following of things. Loads of people around the UK and probably in the States as well, worldwide, used to go to the libraries there reading and borrow stuff. So you could have a perfectly good career as a writer, whether it be a hack writer, literary writer, or somebody with aspirations in between, just producing things for libraries, couldn't you? And obviously these people did. They really sort of churned it out, But going back to that one, so as you say, there's moments of sort of surreal beauty.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, the whole thing about the transformation. So this is obviously mid-70s, isn't it?
Yeah, 75.
75. So it's
75.
after Crystal World, and it's before Blood Music. Which of course has that very big conceptual breakthrough thing, and again with the idea of transformation into plants, which I'm veering off slightly now to horticult SF as we call it. At the end of the Quatermass experiment, where the alien organism that's taken over the astronauts and absorbed them is going to spore, and it's going to spread around the world and destroy all other life and things. So it's that sort of thing, and it's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it is.
So,
But because of Mackleworth's interest in the environment, there's indications that this organism, basically people who become infected by it, a lot die. So it's, about a third of them live, and they're infertile.
So that's a bit Greybeard as
It
well,
is a
isn't
bit
it?
Greybeard,
Which again, Greybeard, very
Yeah.
pastoral book, where there's been, I think in Greybeard there's some sort of solar radiation, isn't it? And nobody's born for a long time,
Yeah.
so all the characters are old. But somewhere there's a new sort of childlike beings are emerging. So do read Greybeard; it's fantastic. Favourite of both of ours.
But there is
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds
Well,
really
as I said at
good,
the beginning, there's a kind of environmental aspect to it, that there are hints that this Martian organism, which was found on Mars, obviously, might be been artificially created as a device to limit population.
Right.
And there were people on Earth who saw photographs, though they didn't tell anyone, of the Martian surface.
Yeah.
And you see all these amazing
shades
structures, and but everything's dead.
Which is interesting, because that's shades of Alternative 3, the TV show. Do you remember the fake TV show?
Yeah.
If you've never seen Alternative 3, look it up. It's fantastic. And we would have both seen Alternative 3 when it was first shown on TV. And everybody thought it was real. Yeah. it was a startler. It was really, really good.
It was.
And again, it's worth underlining, SF has long been concerned with environmental things, long before it was fashionable. It spearheaded that. Even before Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring in the early 60s, which really brought it on board. Really famous, really important book. So that was there as well. And so there's all sorts of connections there. So very interesting. So again, I must try and pick a copy of that up. So good one. So another one for me to read that I haven't read. Fantastic. So you learn stuff every day.
I've got a spare copy of it.
You learn it off everybody, not just experienced people. Everybody you talk to, you learn something from.
Yeah.
So moving on, talking now about a writer that we've discussed many times over the years. This is Vincent King, and you see here the Gonks Yellow Jacket hardcover first, which is quite uncommon. I wouldn't mind one of those myself. And you see the more common Sphere edition of Candyman, and this is probably the one I've enjoyed the most by Vincent King. And what can we say about him? Well, Vincent King is a whole sort of ballpark, isn't it? So what you have your head, and you tell me what you think first, and I'll interject a few things, because I think you've read more of his work than I have.
I've read all of his books, but there are only 4.
Yeah, I think I've read.
But this was published in '71, so Candyman, and there are American editions of some of these.
Look at that for a title: Time Snake and Super Clown. Beautiful orbit. Isn't that lovely? Time Snake and Super Clown. And this is the other one. I think I don't have time. This is the one I don't have. And there's also that one, which I do have, Another End. You see this very often in the UK. This is an American one with a very, very. The cover is like a robot, isn't it? On the cover, so he's sort of cruddy looking little book. It really is. So that's the only one.
Covers aren't great. I mean that is not great.
Like The Last Candle.
Yeah. So we got the American one of that.
Let's talk about him. So what do you think? What have we got to say? And Candyman again is from 1971. So go ahead, dear boy. Give us the blurb on that.
Well, he's, as I say, 71. He is a colourful, interesting, left field. Oddball writer. His books have I think the word flavour is probably the
Flavour
best
Sun.
Flavour Sun.
Flavour Sun, I would say.
I mean, as all of his books they have quite a lot of things in common, but they all tend to be first person narrative, and they're seen very much through the eyes of the character, and the characters don't know exactly what's happening.
No,
because in some books you get this sense that the person knows everything, but they discover things as they go along, and they sometimes get it wrong, which is, I think, a more interesting way.
Well, this is the thing: subjectivity is truth, and all that. And I think he's very florid and ornate. Flavoursome is the word I think of. I always think of that term. I remember when you a short story you submitted to Interzone way back in the 80s, and David Pringle wrote back and said to you, "This is very flavoursome." I think that's David is a great editor. He has a great way with words. And I very much felt that when I read Candyman, which I think was the first Vincent King I read. They can be a bit confusing at times. I think the text.
Well, they're complicated.
They are complicated because it's that withholding of
because the characters don't know what's going on. They'll discover something,
and things are not info dumped and made easy for you.
It's like archaeology. You dig down one layer and you make conclusions. You then go down another layer,
and they're upset and further revelations.
It's like in Light Another Candle. There's a massive question over whether the people who are living on this planet were not the victims or the invaders.
Yes.
And it kind of turns these things on its head. You make the assumption, it's poor little humanity being put down upon.
It's that thing where that thing about tugging the rug of reality from under
yeah.
your feet and getting conceptual breakthrough and then another,
Yeah.
which is something that, you know, all great SF writers really need to aspire to and do, because otherwise you don't get great SF. And, you know, we think lots of examples of that great conceptual breakthrough. And yeah, you know, and sometimes it's done like, I call it a quantum punch, where it's done bang, and other times it's gradual revelation, and then everything falls into place and you think, my God, you know, and that's in all the great SF.
The characters are interesting as well, because they're all kind of damaged people. They're people who are, you know, they're single people living on the margins, sometimes literally on a tundra or something, who then get drawn into events.
They are very sort of edgeland, aren't they? You know, they're people who inhabit liminal spaces, both literally in the environment they live in and also in their consciousness. And I think, I mean, the way I would if I had to sum up Vincent King in one sentence, I'd say his writing is a bit like a jester's motley. You know, it's sort of untidy but colourful, and they're somewhat carnivalesque, and I mean that both in a sort of literary crit way as well. They are quite playful. There's a sort of, you know, a spiciness to them and a tang and a taint, which, you know, it actually reminded me of Angela Carter in lots of ways. I don't think he was in the same ballpark in terms of quality of writing, but there's very much that flavour thing is there. You know, the sauce is there, the seasoning is there, isn't it? And they're very tasty, I guess you could say.
Well, the titles,
you know. Yeah, Candyman.
Yeah.
And I mean, Time Snake and Super. I know I've already gone about this, but Time Snake and Super Clown, isn't that fantastic? Just sort of makes you think of some strange DC comic that had 3 issues and was, you know, drawn by Steve Ditko and then folded or something. And you know, they are quite. They tend to be downbeat as well in the denouements, don't they? As well. You know, we quite like downbeat, don't we?
Well, everybody involved is pretty corrupt, and you know, you can even have people that you think you know, coming from outside who are more intelligent, more sophisticated, and yet they turn out to be engaging in genocide, and you know, so everybody basically is. It's the opposite of Lloyd Biggle. Where there's a kind of a hope. In things in Vincent King's world, everything is.
He was on a donor, man, as the hippies used to say.
But Candyman, again, we keep mentioning environmental factors. I mean, with Candyman, it's set in a world of kind of levels which are built up, and they, you know, were built to get above floodwater from environmental change. And the task of Candyman is to basically switch the machines off, so people can return. To Earth. I think. I mean, you know, all the machines are fighting to stop him, because that's what they've been programmed to do. Not because they're bad. But simply because that is their job.
I think we've, you know, obviously the first 4 writers are people I generally haven't read. I mean, I've read King, and I think of the sort of writers you would say are minor, obscure, neglected. He's one of the most interesting ones. He is frustrating. Sometimes his writing's a bit clunky, but he was obviously somebody reaching for a style or to say something in his own way. And I think he did work as a visual artist, didn't he?
I think he did.
So I suspect that's you certainly feel that in his prose. He does paint very sort of amazing, surreal pictures. You know, I think I'd like to have seen some of his paintings. You probably look them up online, I guess.
I expect you could.
But great stuff. So,
but the funny thing is that he, in amongst the critics, some of them do acknowledge that there's something of interest there.
He divides people.
But he does. But others just completely blank.
He does.
It's beneath the contempt. And I don't.
So
agree with that.
No, you know, I said there's ups and there's downs on this stuff. So seek his work out and give it a try.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's difficult. It's interesting. It's original. But you know,
challenging.
Well worth giving your time to. I certainly, even though I've had my frustrations with King, I certainly never regret spending time giving him a try. He's an interesting sort of guy. Very very much so. So, okay, then we can move on to somebody who came to great fame in the sort of late 80s, especially in the USA, not so much in the UK. This is a Neil Barrett Jr. This is Stress Pattern, as you can see, in Door, with a Josh Kirby cover. Now, because if I just move that close, Josh Kirby, of course, you know from doing the covers of the Terry Pratchett Disco books. Now, shockingly, and apparently this is a big thing online, I haven't looked, so I'm not interested, but they're changing the jackets of the Pratchett books supposedly because the sales are dipping. Now, because obviously he's dead, and he said his daughter could carry it on, and she didn't want him, what have you. So there's no new ones and that. Now they still sell pretty well. They don't sell like they used to, but they still sell pretty well. They're changing the covers, and people are apparently up in arms about it. And they were up in arms when they went from A format to a B format. They went from this size to the bigger, more standard size paperback. So that's dress pattern, not on the cover. That is relevant to what's going on in there. And I think Jules Burt showed this in one of. I think he did a thing about his favourite door covers, and it might have been that. He's done lots of door videos, Jules. We do love door because it's great fun, even though a lot of the books are quite frankly terrible. This is an interesting one. Perhaps. How can we talk about? I'd like to kick off on this one, if I may. If you want to sort of do the thing. Now that's early in his career, isn't it? Now, is it his first novel? I'm not certain.
No, it's not.
It's not, is it?
There were two.
Yeah, I can't think what they are.
No, I've got them, but I didn't bring them.
We have to look them up.
It's like Leaves of Time.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Those which are kind of. Yeah.
So this is about 74, 75. Typical door book, very short, 150 pages. Gets in, gets out. And I have to say, I read this recently, and I absolutely loved the opening part of it. It's a first-person narrative. You've got this character who is an economist, and I'll mention this now before it goes out of my head and I forget. It did remind me of Solaris, both in its structure, conceptually. I don't think it's as good a book as Solaris. It comes after Solaris, but it covers some similar things, but in a very, very different way. And you get this first-person narrative, and this chap is an economist, and he's heading on a spaceship to another planet for work reasons. And he basically gets shot out in an escape pod, doesn't he? Something happens, and he gets shot out in an escape pod, and he ends up on this very drab brown planet where there's not any sort of colour or anything anywhere. And he has a very sort of quirky, staccato, and striking and enjoyable first-person voice. The guy's like a bureaucrat, but you do like. I liked his personal life. I thought this guy's really interesting. And in terms of characterization, sort of classic mimetic, realistic fiction, focusing on character, is just so strong.
He was making lists of colours.
This
brown
is great.
And tan,
and amber. And he's different. And he's sort of missing colour and things. He's trying to work out how to survive, and he digs up these plants from underground. He's shown. And there are people there. They're humanoid, but they're quite odd, and there seem to be different varieties of them, and they're mostly little. And really, he goes on this little Hagira, this journey, and I mean, with this large worm thing, that is part of it. Now, you see people there, they look like they're waiting for it. If it's a monster, why are they waiting for it? When you read it, you find out why. And it's very novel. It goes to the heart of novelty in SF. It's really entertaining. And later on in the book, it goes into questions of intelligence, evolution. It resembles Solaris in that the character is rather like Kelvin. He's on this planet, but he's there, by accident. And he makes certain assumptions about the evolutionary level of the beings, and he finds them, he can communicate with them, but they don't seem to be very bright. But there is really amazing conceptual breakthrough towards the end. There's a flood, which I thought it got bogged down, if you pardon the pun. And I personally felt with a bit of judicious editing, this would have made an amazing novella at about 80 to 90 pages. But there is a sequence where, well, there's a woman, or is it, rather like in Solaris. So if you like Solaris, give this a try, because you would enjoy it. It's not comparable in terms of quality, I wouldn't say, but it's well worth the read. And it has a lot of the same concepts and very interesting. I did feel the conceptual breakthrough at the end, which is very clever. And in a way, it's a bit like Blindsight in that what it says about, it's not the same thing, the consciousness thing, but it's similar in that our assumptions about evolution as a hierarchy, as a ladder, this takes a different sort of tack, and I thought that was really, really good, and I enjoyed it. It's a different and diverting read, very much. So if you want to talk about Neil Barrett Jr., what have you got to say about him? I'm sure you have.
Well, I think you said it, really. It's a fun book. But it's also quite dark and serious. I mean, the landscape he finds himself in. He has to learn how to survive.
It's like I
It
think,
is similar to June in certain.
yeah, there is some
Only
to do.
interesting,
Yeah,
you
in
know,
some
yeah,
ways,
yeah.
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 And I think you said when we were talking about this that it was like a wonderland for the colourblind.
Yeah, that's
Which
that's
it is,
quoting the
really.
book.
Yeah,
It-
because
it
there is a bit of a
yeah.
pastiche of Dune in
Yeah.
there, but giant
Yeah.
worms. But it's it does stick in your head. And I've only read it recently, but I can't imagine ever forgetting it. It is a memorable one. And he went on. He in the 80s he did some post-apocalyptic stuff, didn't he? Through Darkest
He did,
America.
yeah.
What's the other one? The one that was
Dawn's
in-
Uncertain Light.
Dawn's Uncertain
Yeah.
Light.
Yeah.
Through Darkest America was in the Isaac Asimov Discovery
It was,
series,
yeah.
I think, especially in
Yeah.
paperback.
Yeah.
Which is a sort
In the
of
80s,
serious
yeah.
post-apocalyptic narrative, boy and his dog type thing. But yeah, so and I think I have seen him compared to Heinlein. I'm not really sure
No.
about that. It does say "Stranger in the Strangest Land"
Yeah.
on here, and it's obviously from that 70s paperback period. But yeah, well worth picking up.
There's some quite interesting concepts, though, because the natives he meets, they keep asking him why he
Yeah.
wants to go anywhere.
Yes.
They have no conception
Yeah.
of travelling. They're saying, well,
And yet
you
travelling
don't
comes
know
to-
what is there.
And yeah, travelling becomes
Yeah,
a big thing
yeah,
in the
it does,
narrative.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
the sort of more inventive parts about travelling and things. But it's also through that evolutionary journey,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
very clever. And in a way, it reminded me of something I've said about The People That Time Forgot by Edgar Rice Burroughs. You ever read that?
No, I haven't.
In that,
actually.
in Caspar
No.
Caprona, the land that time forgot, there's all dinosaurs and cavemen and what
Seen
have
the
you.
film, though.
People evolve. Oh my God! People evolve. They can evolve personally. They can be born like in a pond as a primitive being, and they sort of change their life, and it's their evolutionary potential, and they move through different sort of types of cultures. It's a weird idea, but it's really great.
Well, that is
And
similar
it's-
because
yeah,
people
it is similar. Yeah,
are kind of
yeah,
created,
yeah.
aren't they, by people's.
Oh, let's go any
thoughts.
further. Let's not
Yeah,
spoil it. Yeah.
That's a spoiler.
So,
yeah.
but yeah, nonetheless, stress pattern. Give it a go. It's interesting stuff. So then we come on to somebody again with. Again, this is somebody who had lots of acclaim, isn't it, for a very small thing, and we're talking.
Felix Gottschalk.
Yeah, Felix Gottschalk,
Gottschalk, yeah.
and that's Ace Science Fiction. Can we Ace Science Fiction special there, dear boy? And I think this is the only this short story.
As far as I'm aware, it's
I think it's the only one,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
And
1975.
Yeah.
Ace special.
yeah, and this guy was a nominee for the John W. Campbell Award back in the mid-70s, and it's published by Ace, and I've got one of these as well. I read this fairly recently too. It's very short, as you see. And who edited this? Was it Terry Carr? Was this before Terry Carr's
I think it was
time?
before Terry Carr.
I think it is, isn't it? I'm
Yeah.
not sure who was the editor of this series.
There's a time when there were loads. of
Later in the
amazing books
80s,
coming out.
this is the 80s.
And also a lot of very
yeah.
obscure books,
But,
weirdly.
I mean, if you look on the back, there's a little square then. It tells you the other people in this series. Let's see, Philip K. Dick, John Brenner, Ursula Le Guin, Roger Zelazny, Silverberg, Moorcock, Shaw, Lafferty, Ron Goulart, Avron Davison, Joanna Rush. In good company, Clifford Simak, Mac Reynolds, Marion Zimmer Bradley, in sort of very sort of esteemed company there. And again, critically, this is meant to be the thing, isn't it? So
Yeah.
what would you say about it? What's your take on it? Give
It's
us
another
your
one of
take.
these kind of books that blows your mind.
Growing up in Tier
Yeah,
3000.
You know,
is the
the
title.
language, the way it's written, the
Yeah.
concepts. I mean, it's one of the first authors to try and look to a kind of massively highly technological future, which is kind of, obviously we're sort of living in that world now.
Yeah.
And, it's a way people, I don't know what I was going to say.
He'll get there, don't worry.
I'll get there one day.
Yeah, he'll get
Yeah.
there. I'll tell you what, I'll talk about it while he gets there, because
Generally they his characters are often precocious children,
Yes,
who are incredibly brightening,
Yeah.
incredibly clever, who
Yeah.
are kind of evolving their parents,
and they're about 5-year-olds.
yeah, and they're like
yeah. They've got that sort of odd John super being
Yeah.
type thing,
Yeah.
haven't they? But I mean, it's something I think when we were talking about this before, you said, he is idiosyncratic.
It's very.
And he's been compared to John Boyd, very
Yeah,
interesting writer,
yeah.
John Boyd.
Cordwainer
Smith.
Yeah.
You like Cordwainer Smith? I think you love this. It's got that sort of. I mean, Cordwainer Smith. That part of the feeling comes from his thing with Shinosuri, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His sort of
Yeah.
Oriental influences, where there's a sort of airy, sort of light sophistication about it, and that's kind of in this. And R.A. Lafferty again. There's
Yeah,
a playful thing, and I have to say, this is, that these kids, they live in this sort of in Tier 3000, this densely populated community, and I think you all said we felt there was quite a lot of jargon and argot in this. It's this particular language that they use, and it's dense. And I have
they're
to
not
say,
just speaking
no,
we do now.
No.
So just assuming that everything remains the same.
It's almost like a Shakespeare play when they come out in rhyming couplets. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not rhyming, but it's very poetic what they come up with. You can tell that he spent a lot of time. He didn't just toss it off. It's sort of carefully sort of crafted. But at the same time, I have to say my feeling about it is I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
I also find it very irritating, but it was stylistically irritating to me.
Yeah.
But that's part of the point. He's using language to put you into a different state of consciousness. Because I think something you've got to be aware of when you read SF is the way it's expressed. If it's first person, which this isn't first. Is this first person? I can't recall.
I don't think it is.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. When it's first person, you can either write in the parlance of today, or you can sort of really try and be very experimental and try and the parlance of tomorrow, and that can be very hard to pull off and can make for a difficult read. And it's a brave thing. I mean, look, one of the classic things that way is Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban, isn't it? Which is a great book, a very tough read, and. I mean, what I liked about it was that it cognitively estranged me straight away. It shook me, and I had this sort of, I've got to pay attention now. I can't make assumptions about this. I need to sort of concentrate, focus on this world. So it is challenging, and I did find, even if the kids are fascinating, but what it did remind me of is they're quite breathless and fey in a way, and it did remind me of. Sort of collegiate hoorays from sort of like a 20s British public school narrative, sort of Sebastian and what have you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely fine. It did feel very, very much that way. So, and I'm not always a big fan of that. I tend to like more hard-boiled prose. And I think, a big Silverberg fan. That's why Nightwings is one of my least favourite books, because it's got that sort of airy thing. And yet Delaney does that in a way that I just find, I never find Delaney fey or breathless though. I just find there's a sort of scent of freedom in the air with Delaney and stuff. So I can see why this never became commercially successful, and you can see why
never
it didn't break through.
There've been loads of short
This
stories.
is the only edition, I think, as well.
Very similar.
But
that's the only edition of that book.
Yeah.
And he has written other novels, none of which.
So he's a
were
real
published.
outlier, So and obviously this, it's a weird thing because you see this. I mean, our friend Tom Toner, the SF writer, Tom had fantastic reviews for The Promised Child, his first book, from people like Adam Roberts and Paul DeFilippo. And then a lot of people read it and loved it. A lot of people didn't, so the second volume didn't do so well. But those are very ornate books and very ambitious. And, writers and critics often like these things. They like the difficulty, they like that, but it doesn't always mean you get to a mass audience.
No.
So if you want to read something a bit different, give it a try. For me, I wasn't entirely convinced. But it was really interesting, and it's good to sort of taste these things. But I didn't enjoy as much as the Barrett, but in a way it's better written, I would say, and this to me was more like The King than the Barrett, but they're all sort of distinct, and there is a distinct flavour to lots of these books, and I'm aware we've picked books from a certain period, and we will do this again and pick things from other periods, from the 60s and the 80s and what have you. And as you know, I've been trying to do a 90s TBR, and that's given me some pain, as you will have seen. But it is sort of interesting stuff when you get a lot of acclaim, but it doesn't sort of turn into anything. It's a shame. So that's the only one we can show you, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
But it's quite interesting how most of these books are published within like 10 years of each other.
Yeah. And it's weird.
Must reflect when I was getting into SF in the 80s.
A
lot of these books were fairly new then.
When we narrowed this down, because we initially had a list of about 15 or 20, and there's lots of other things we will do more. So if you enjoy this, let us know. We'll do some more because there's lots of other things. And we picked some of these. I think Graham sort of gave me my head and let me have the final cut of what we'd pick, based on what I'd read, what I hadn't read, things we'd read critically about these writers and what have you. So we are maybe looking at a certain period from the late 60s to the sort of mid 80s, but it is what it is. And so an interesting one. Moving on, this is somebody who I remember having a career in the 80s, Christopher Hinds. There we go. And this is Anachronisms.
Yeah, it was published in 1988.
1988.
Originally.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different to the others.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that when I read it, I had no particular expectations for it, but was actually quite blown away with it.
Mandarin paperback, Methuen. Yeah.
The themes in it, the plot and everything is familiar, kind of Alien-esque, or
Voyage of the Space Beagle,
Beagle
Van Vogt,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Going to an alien
Yeah.
planet and
Seek out new worlds of civilization.
coming back with something nasty.
Yeah.
But it was a whole way it was approached. It has a kind of cyberpunk feel to it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of technology.
Yeah, because
a lot of things
that would have
going
been the thing, because of course, cyberpunk being something which came out in a big way in the early 80s, and it infected the rest of hard SF, because it was one way that new wave and hard SF clashed and came together and found a new hybrid was in cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And so you kind of had to do that a bit. And because when we first read things like Neuromancer, you thought, well, yeah, this is probably the way the world's going to turn out. It's the way it has turned out. So everybody picked it up, and it wasn't a bad thing. So so I don't think I've ever even looked at this. I'm sure it's to sell it.
Well, this is the thing, you wouldn't.
So, yeah.
I don't even know why I picked it up.
Yeah.
But I read it and thought, hang on, this should be at best just okay.
Yeah, the blurb on the back is like a list of cliches, isn't it?
Yeah.
But again, it's about how
somehow
it's done.
it's all about how it's written.
Yeah, good stuff, yeah.
And it's one of those authors, when you read reviews and stuff like that, nobody mentions.
No.
All they talk about is the plot, but there's a lot more to it than that.
And this one, the Compton Crook Stephen Tall Award.
Yeah, Stephen.
What is that? I don't know.
It's an award. It's a
Maybe,
mainstream award.
Is it
as far
really?
as I'm aware.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It wasn't that, but it was another book.
For Liege Killer.
Yeah,
right.
Liege Killer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Which sounds like a fantasy or historical novel. So there you go. It's Christopher Haynes. So that's one to
Liege
look at as
Killer
well.
is science fiction.
Is it? Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it when a genre SF book wins a mainstream award. Happens so little. I mean, Chris Beckett, with the Turing test is the big one. And what a great guy Chris is. He's lovely, isn't he? So, so that's an interesting one. So, a 80s cyberpunk take on Voyage of the Space Beagle, or Alien as you will know it. So there we are. So that's a little sidebar there. And we're doing 10 today, so we've got 2 left. And the next one, I mean, this is somebody I meant to read for ages and ages. And this is, what's his name? William Sloane, isn't it? Born in 1906. Now, New York Review of Books Classics, NYRB Classics, which are the most beautiful paperbacks in the world, they do. I think it might be an omnibus of these two.
Well, they've been published before. As an omnibus.
I think the NYRB one, which you never see in the UK.
I didn't even know it existed.
I have tried to order it before. When I ordered it before, it wasn't available, so I must get one. And the way the NYRB presented it in their catalogue was a bit like it was like a literary H.P. Lovecraft. And I thought, well, I sort of done Lovecraft. Do I really want to go there? And it sort of put me off. But I think there's a bit more to it, isn't it? It's really so. So we've got 2 books here. And is this a diptych? Is this a sequence?
Well, sort of.
So they're
can be
loosely linked.
Yeah, loosely linked.
So we've got The Edge of Running Water, Del Rey, absolutely beautiful. Look at that. It's got a spooky house there. And To Walk the Night, again in Del Rey. Absolutely lovely. We do love the A format paperback here, as you know. This is the place for A format SF on the old tube of you. And what have we got to say about them? So, like I say, I haven't read them.
They look like, I'm going to say modern books, but they look like books from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
But they're actually written in
the 30s?
37.
Yeah.
37.
Yeah, so they go
39.
way back to the age of weird fiction.
Yeah.
The late period of weird
when
fiction.
occult fiction was the thing.
Was the thing.
Before horror came along. People like Dennis Wheatley and the like. And it is basically an SF book with a occult aspect to it.
Right, so let's address the thorny question here. You know my thing about horror isn't a genre. Some of it's SF, some is fantasy, some is crime. So, what's the novum in this? Is there are there supernatural entities in this which are scientifically unexplained or inexplicable?
Well, in one of them, it's basically there's this guy who dies in mysterious circumstances.
Right.
And he recently married this woman.
Who married a woman?
Yeah.
Radical.
Amazing.
Isn't there there's a film, isn't there, called I Married a Woman?
Yeah,
That's great.
Nobody knows where she came from or anything.
Right,
and basically she is an alien.
Right. Okay.
So that is the science fiction side.
So she's an extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So,
and in the other one, is about a guy
Night.
who invents a machine to talk to the
aliens. No,
to talk to the dead. The other one.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, I'll have to get that NYRB one.
Yeah.
Because it's very beautiful as well. It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think it's one that may not be distributed in the UK because I've tried to get it before. I think I have to get it from Amazon because I don't think I get it from work because things are copyright protected. Often you can't get.
I don't see how it can be. I'm not aware it's ever been published in the UK before.
I mean, when I came across him first, looking at the NYRB catalogue or their website, and I thought, okay, because they do great SF, and they do a small amount, but they do fantastic stuff. Chris Priest, D.G. Compton, John Wyndham, Ernst Junger, Class B, stuff like that. So okay, so I will have to read these at some point and give you my take on whether they're SF or fantasy, because it's an important thing for me.
But for me, it was the writing. Yes, they are beautifully written.
Yeah, well, the very fact they're in NYRB tells you that. It's that thing. NYRB do a interesting anthology called Shadows of Carcosa, which again isn't available in the UK and is print on demand now. We've been trying to get one for ages, and it's got things like Lovecraft, Macca, and what have you, and all sorts of things like that. And you know the term Carcosa from The King in Yellow and the first season of True Detective. But Chambers wasn't the first to use it. I can't think who came up with it. Was it Ambrose Bierce? I think it was Ambrose Bierce or Algernon Blackwood. I think it's Bierce. I just can't recall. But but these are absolutely beautiful books, man, I must say. Very interesting. I love the title, To Walk the Night. That's very stentorian, isn't it? And the edge of running water. You can feel the frisson of the air.
Well, I think it was the title, and reading reviews of those, and James Cawthorne Xanadu.
Oh, the Xanadu book of the 100 Fantasy. That was one Moorcock was supposed to write, but in the end he couldn't because he was too busy, and he just did the introduction and called it. It's a great book, actually. Fantasy, the 100 best novels or something, isn't it? Really good. I've got that as well. Yeah, it is in there, isn't it? God, I haven't read that book for years. I must pick it up, see what I've been missing, what I've not got round to. And we're going to close today with this is, I would say, this is a more famous book, and I have no idea how to pronounce this guy's name. Daniel F. Galou, is it? Galloy. Him. Dark Universe. And I'd heard of this way back in the 90s. I can't remember how, probably in a reference book. This is a nice Hamlin one, it's a very handsome one, and you don't see this around very much now. There was an SF book club one in the UK, and
I think there was a Glank Shilling Jacket.
Yeah, I think there might have been, because there was a
Victor Glanks.
There was a hardback SF book club one with the white cover, which is horrible looking, but you can't pick it up. And I heard about it. I think I was aware of it, and then I had a conversation. It must have been in the very early days of the internet, when I was buying something from an American dealer, a paperback. I can't for the life of me think what it was. So it must be about 20 years ago, and we were chatting about Neuromancer, and he sent me a copy of Dark Universe free with the book I bought from him, which is really, really nice. And it was one of those things where he said, I think you'll find the sort of computer elements in this similar in some ways to the AI stuff in Neuromancer. And it was really sort of interesting. And I think, he is similar to Philip K. Dick, isn't he? But it's the ontological question of what is real and our perception, can we trust it? And, there's is it now I'm getting confused now, because is Simulacron 3 the computer in there?
That is Simulacron 3 is where the main character discovers he's in a virtual reality.
Yeah, we got a copy of it,
which is very, very much.
Here we go. Hang on, I'm going to cheer so much.
Very much Philip K. Dick's thing.
Yeah. I think we should sort of talk about, on that side, the computer side, a quick aside to John Sladek's The Muller-Fokker Effect, where a guy is downloaded into a computer. And there's an early Priest story, Chris Priest story, called Sentence in Binary Code, which is a similar thing, so it predates that. So while we're on it, we'll also show you Lords of the Psychon. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Wow, that turns me on. That's fantastic, isn't it?
That's only some of his books.
Wow. And this is a more famous one again, isn't it? Project Barrier. But anyway, go tell us more about that one, dear boy. Go ahead.
Again, we've got Tim White covers.
Tim White cover. Yeah. Can't go wrong, really, can you?
Well, this is quite different in a sense, in that it's set in a post-nuclear war future when people have basically been hiding in underground for so long that they've
like the penultimate truth.
Well, basically everyone is blind
by Philip K. Dick. They become blind cavefish, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. And basically
the hero of the story discovers there is
light.
light.
It's a big conceptual
It's a
breakthrough.
big concept. Right, yeah, it's like
yeah.
like the Blish story, Surface Tension. Where,
Yeah, from the Seedling Stars. Yeah, the Pantropy story, which we love.
Yeah,
we love the Seedling Stars.
But when the guy, he suddenly realizes there's this amazing world outside.
Yeah.
But what is amazing about
See, people think it's new because of Hugh Howey.
Yeah, no, it's ancient.
Oh,
This
well.
is 1961.
Yeah.
But the writing is top notch in here, as he, because he's writing about people who, they can't see.
Yes.
So all the descriptions are based on hearing, smell.
It's the rest of the sensorium.
All the other senses.
Yeah. Rest of the sensor. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a year since I've read it, but I found it very interesting. And I think it must have been Simulacron 3, because I remember reading it and thinking I can't quite see what he means, but the dealer might be talking about Simulacron 3. So, but that's the only one I've read.
This is quite different to those others I've read.
Yeah, the one I was sent, I think, is a very early paperback. It dates way back to the early 60s. So So and he again, there's quite a bit of acclaim for him, wasn't there? Yeah, interesting writer. So what we'll wrap up. So there's sort of 10 interesting writers and 10 books and some others. But we'll flash some other things over because we've got, as usual, we've got tons of other stuff here. Let's see. Neil Barrett Jr. We'll just go back a bit. He did loads in Door. Look at that. There's a wedge of doors for you. And this was one I don't know. The Karma Core. That's cool, isn't it? It's got this. He looks like a sort of deranged sword-wielding farm boy there. So that's a flaky one. Karma Core. Beautiful yellow. Look at that.
Title for your autobiography.
Yeah, it'll happen, man. It'll happen. The toned text block. Absolutely beautiful. I don't see that one very much. These ones you see more. This is the Aldair series, which, you see these a lot more frequently. And you've read these.
You don't always see all of them.
Yeah. You see some.
I have read them. I've read most of his books.
The one that you see most often, and I've seen her a lot.
Down in Albion.
Is because we're in the UK, because we're in Albion, and what have you. So you see that one, and there you go. Master of Ships, and I would imagine these are fairly routine. But,
well, they're not.
Look at that cover, routine or not, you're going to want that.
I don't think they're remotely routine.
I'm going to pick up. So there you go. You see, never judge a book by its cover. And I do have a bit of a go at Door. This is Josh Kirby, isn't that fantastic? I love Josh Kirby stuff. But it's that thing, It's so watch out for those. But these are all in nice nick as well. So he's one of your guys, isn't he, Neil Barrett? I really should read more of his stuff. So there you go.
Well, that. Through Darkest America was the first thing in the Asimov recommended series. That was the first book I read, which is a much bigger, more ambitious book.
Yes, So it's pretty savage stuff,
great.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's savage stuff. Okay, so there's some obscurities for you, some neglected stuff. If you like this, we'll do a lot more. We've got lots of other ideas and stuff. We are going to do some things which are based in certain periods of time. Again, what we'll try and do, the beauty for me of having Graham as a guest on the channel is that between us, we've read tons with lots of stuff. It's like a Venn diagram. If we're both circles, there's an area where we intersect. There's other areas where I've read and he hasn't, and vice versa. And it's all stimulating stuff. And this is why it's good to have well-read friends, And that's the beauty of YouTube, I guess. It's easy to get those things out there to a bigger audience. So I hope you've enjoyed that. What do we think? Are neglected books always bad? Of course they're not.
No.
Are popular books always great?
No.
Of course they're not.
No.
Is everything subjective?
It is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So there you go. So anyway, thanks for that. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, comment, super thanks if you want. And there'll be another episode probably in about a month, maybe sooner. It's just fitting it in is the thing. And bye for now. Bye, Graham.
Bye.
Bye.